U.S. South, as you just heard. In fact, my native language is French, but I'll make this presentation in English. No habla español. Thank you for inviting me. I represent one of the oldest producing countries of pellets in the world, and I'd like to show you what our presence is on the international markets. I'll talk to you about the Wood Pellet Association of Canada, which I represent, some production and consumption statistics, the export markets that we work in and we've been working on for decades now, also some aspects of sustainability certification, which are important to conserve these markets in the long term, and a little bit on the Canadian market opportunity, and to allow you to compare with the European market. The Wood Pellet Association of Canada is now comprised of 21 producing members that represent over 90% of the production in Canada. There's 50 associate members also. We're an advocate for the pellet industry. We try to communicate with governments on policies for developing the markets. We also offer some strong technical support to the industry. We published the first material safety data sheet that's being used worldwide now. We're publishing better practices manuals for operations and for safety. We've been at the forefront of studying the off-gassing characteristics of pellets, particularly for overseas shipments, etc. We also take care of market developments and communications for the industry, and sometimes that brings me to foreign spaces like Valladolid today. The production capacity in Canada has been steadily growing over the last decade or so. Production in Canada started in 1982. I'm trying to up one on Arnold here, but of course, until the early 2000s, the production was relatively limited until we started exporting pellets to Europe in the late 90s significantly, and more so today. We see that installed capacity has outpaced production, which is the case worldwide from what I understand, and that the production capacity is used a little over 60% right now by the industry. The local consumption is the graph on the bottom. You can see that although Canada is theoretically a potential huge customer for pellets, we consume very little pellets locally. The price of other forms of energy, including natural gas and electricity, for instance, are much cheaper. To the gentleman who was asking the price for electricity, in Canada, the prices for industrial consumption of electricity is around 6 Canadian cents, 4.5 euro cents per kilowatt hour, and the cost for residential customers is only 8 cents, or about 6 euro cents per kilowatt hour. So we have, for instance, in my part of the country, more than 50% of the population that heats with electricity, which seems inconceivable maybe here. The consumption locally is mostly in the central part of Canada, in the eastern part of Canada, with Quebec, where I come from, being the main user. And it's used in mostly residential applications to displace heating oil, and has had some success at doing that in the recent years. Although this year we're seeing a price drop in oil, and we may see some limited growth there. The Canadian production capacity is installed mostly on both ends of the country. Canada is a large country. We have 5 time zones. I think we're only beaten on that by the Russians. Most of the production capacity is located on both coasts. In British Columbia, particularly on the west coast, we see most of the production. 2/3 of the Canadian production is in that region, as is much of the sawmilling activity in Canada also. We're seeing new developments currently in the center of Canada. There's 2 large pellet plants being built there to serve both a local market that has developed and mostly to serve overseas markets with most of the pellets being planned for export to the UK out of there. There are currently new pellet plants being built in Ontario for 600,000 metric tons per year. In fact, 650 with a Thunder Bay plant. About 90,000 of that will be for the local market. The rest will be for export. There's a 40,000 ton plant being built in British Columbia, and they plan on possibly making torrefied pellets there. They have recently been looking at also for export markets for this product. There's been some announcements for new plants in British Columbia, over 175,000 metric ton, and 3 megawatts electricity with the Can4 Pacific Bio, which are current producers of pellets already in that area. Global Biocoal, Hazelton, 200,000 metric ton a year, possibly torrefied pellets for export to Korea. This is a joint venture between some Koreans and local First Nations. And there's a plant being proposed by Pinnacle under currently municipal bylaw review for pellets of 200,000 tons there. So the production capacity in Canada will increase significantly over the next year or so. We export, this is probably the same graph as Seth, but on another direction. We do most of our exports currently to the United Kingdom for industrial applications, Drax having been one of the major clients there. But we're seeing significant increases in Italy, whereas the United States for the residential markets used to be our main export market. We're now seeing more volumes going to Italy than there are going to the United States. We have exported a little bit to South Korea and Japan. I'll touch on that a little later. The rest of the markets there are relatively small for us. The Netherlands has gone to zero with their changes in their pricing structure for subsidizing renewable energy. The same for Belgium, which has seen some significant decreases there. In Asia, we're seeing a market that is still hesitant. We've exported to Japan, in fact, have slowed down a little bit over the last 2 years. And this year, we understand they're probably going to be stable, whereas Korea has seen significant growth with the market last year being 100,000 tons or more. And in fact, this year, we're seeing probably 4 times that amount going to Korea, with volumes from the West Coast being transported there. And the reason being that British Columbia, the west coast of Canada, is in fact very interesting for Korean as a market for us. And I'd like to correct I must tease Marcos on his graph here that shows that pellets are being shipped from Asia to Canada. In fact, it's the other way around. Pellets are being shipped from North America to Asia. And not imported into Canada or the US. Right now, the markets that we're serving there are mostly Korea, as mentioned, and they're spot markets. In fact, the Canadians are not selling pellets directly there, but as Seth mentioned, this is becoming a worldwide commodity market, and we're seeing the Canadian pellets that were originally bought by European traders or European pellet consumers, industrial pellet consumers, being shipped to Korea because of some market shortfalls, possibly, for instance, in Belgium and in the Netherlands, the long-term contracts there had to be rerouted, and rerouting them to Korea for the last 2 years has been an interesting option. We are increasing our capacity to export on both sides of the land, on the Pacific and on the eastern coast. In Quebec City, we have just built 2 large domes for export, 75,000 tons capacity, 37,500 tons each. These will be handling the pellets coming from Ontario and possibly from Quebec also over the long run. They have a capacity of exporting over 1 million tons there now. The same applies for Prince Rupert, which is on the west coast, a bit further north than Vancouver, where they have built 4 silos with the expectation of building up to 7 silos there, allowing to serve large vessels. They are now looking at being able to ship up to 55, 60,000 tons on one ship. They call these the Panama Max for the new generation of vessels that can go through the new Panama Canal. Will be able to ship. And this is to serve these large industrial clients. A client like Drax in the UK will be, I understand, discharging one of these ships every second day. So they want large ships to be able to handle the millions of tons that they'll be consuming on one site. We are working to keep our view of sustainable production available to everybody and trying to work on common criteria for measuring sustainability. Currently, there's some multiple systems in place in Europe, and we're working with the energy consumers and the UCIPA and the European Industrial Pellet Council to find simpler ways of documenting this sustainability so that international trade, as Seth has discussed in his presentation, can occur, and there's no issue about the quality of pellets being shipped into different jurisdictions. And WPAC is a participating member of that, along with the main producers. In fact, we're putting in place a sustainability audit system for the Sustainable Biomass Partnership. We started doing these audits on a trial basis in Canada earlier this year. We're currently going through the process of having these audits completed, and each generator will help implement it with their own suppliers. There are current contracts that have to be moved into this system over time. It may not happen overnight, but we expect that most of the pellets coming overseas will be covered by this type of documentation to ensure that the end user can qualify for all of his sustainable schemes. The market potential, as Seth mentioned, Canada also had a very huge paper industry that is going down, and there's large volumes of biomass available, on top of which there were already large volumes being left in the forest. In Quebec, we're talking 6 million tons a year, Ontario 6 million tons a year, BC 10 million tons a year, not even counting the tens of millions of tons that the paper industry is not using anymore. So there's lots of material available in Canada. Of course, the extraction costs are not zero. It's not free material. We have to pay to go extract it from the forest, but when we do it in cooperation with the existing stakeholders, we manage to do this competitively on the world scale. Canada has the highest forestry certification in the world. Most of its land is public land, and it's required in many jurisdictions. So we have access to sustainable forests locally that is documented by and encouraged by all the local governments. Canada is also highly industrialized and has high energy consumers along with producers, and we're looking to try and develop local markets along that way. Our residential market needs some support and some development, and we represent a very small portion of the energy being used in Canada today. Last week I heard numbers of 5 to 10% in some jurisdictions in Europe. In Canada, pellets only make 0.3% of all domestic heating fuels. But we believe we can grow to that tenfold. We've had examples here in Europe of successful market developments of that nature. And that would represent 1.75 million of tons of pellets for the Canadian market. And interestingly enough, also the secondary effect would be to the investment that would be brought in by putting in those stoves, investment which is often one of the reasons the markets are slow to develop. We're also developing industrial markets. We'll have the first North American 100% conversion of biomass starting up this winter in Ontario. This is a 200 megawatt power plant that used to run on low-grade coal, lignite coal, and it'll be consuming only 90,000 tons of pellets a year because it'll only be running on peak electric demand, but it has the potential in the long run to consume up to 1 million tons a year, but right now just 90,000 tons of increase in Canada represents a 50% market growth next year. The Wood Pellet Association also organizes this type of conference. I invite you to come and visit us in Montreal next winter in February. It might be cold, but we'll be talking pellets, and it should warm up the room. In February 18th and 19th in Canada. It's along with the Canadian Wood Show, so we do get lots of foreign visitors, including for sawmilling and for pellets. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thanks a lot. Perfect. On time. Questions for John? Any question?
There was a question previously on fiber supply. Canadian fiber supply prices are slightly higher than the south of the U.S., but because of the large lumber activity in the West Coast, they're particularly interesting for export, but certainly much less than in Europe. We're talking in the East, West Coast probably around $60 a metric ton for fiber. In the East Coast of Canada, we're closer to $100 a metric ton for fiber. But it's
good. Thanks, John. We will change this. Sorry for that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.